Okay, script, prompt, spreadsheet, slides, sound. Okay, let's do this. Hello everybody, and welcome to the Benguela Videologue, a journal of the current events and goings-on of the South African healthcare industry. For those of you who are new to this channel, and that would be all of you, my name is Derry, and I'm a consultant and director here at Benguela, and this is video number 1. Now, as this is our first video, we wanted to make a bit of an impression and splash out a little bit, the result of which you can see in this no expense spared CGI background behind me, aiming for nothing less than the highest production values here. In all seriousness, no, we have just moved into our new office, and so you can expect some changes over time. New lighting, I think, would be a start. Maybe a plant in the background. Yeah, let's see how things go. Now, let's talk about why we're doing this. Well, firstly, we wanted to create a space for ourselves and our friends in the industry to have open and honest discussions about what's going on in the healthcare sector. And it's just not something we see happening right now, at least not in the audiovisual medium. Secondly, we think the timing is right. It may be a bit of a cliche to say that healthcare is at a crossroads at the moment, and I actually don't think that would be accurate. Actually, I think we're more like at the edge of a cliff. And there's some events that will be happening on the near horizon that will determine whether we fall off that cliff or if we actually manage to pull ourselves back from it. And that actually brings us quite neatly onto the topic of today's video. I actually tried to film this just over a month ago. I'll throw in some B-roll there for you to have a look at and have a good laugh at. But you can see that it was a time before I had any proper recording equipment or indeed a dedicated space. The reason I wanted to jump the gun, though, was that I had received some news which saddened the hell out of me, and I was massively distressed. And it was certainly something that I thought I would never see again, or something we'd seen the last of in the medical schemes industry in South Africa. Of course, what I'm talking about is the voluntary liquidation of Health Squared Medical Scheme. The idea at the time was to examine the circular that was sent out by the principal officer to the members and explained why the scheme had failed and what was going to happen from there on in. And to examine the various failures of the Board of Trustees, the administrator, and indeed the regulator, but most importantly, why it was always inevitable that that scheme would fail. Now, I filmed that piece on a Friday, but by the Monday, it had been all over the weekend press. And by now, of course, there's at least a dozen variations of what happened and who's to blame. So there's not much point in really rehashing any of that. To the short version of it really is that Health Squared Medical Scheme was by far the oldest medical scheme, or at least open medical scheme by average age, and was hemorrhaging young and healthy members. And the trustees and the administrators failed to turn that around. Now, there are many parties to blame, and the whole incident is an indictment of our current regulatory system and of for-profit administrators who have more influence on the medical schemes than the members that own them. So the question then is, where does this discussion go next? And the answer to that is actually what prompted today's video. Because the question is no longer about who's to blame or what happened. The question is now far more terrifying than that. The question is now, who's next? Now, I do have some thoughts and indeed some data on those medical schemes that I think are perilously close to the edge of that cliff. But that's a whole video by itself. Instead, to preface that video, I'd like to discuss why the medical schemes industry at large is in the worst shape it has ever been, and why its current state could lead to more health squareds. To do that, we need to look at some pictures. So let's start with the easy stuff first. What we have here is a basic graph. It shows two things. It shows the number of medical schemes that have and are in our industry from 2010 to 2021, and the number of lives those medical schemes represent. Simply put, we have less medical schemes now than we did in 2010, 25 less, but the membership has been steadily growing. Up until 2019, or between 2019 and 2020, where we did lose some members, and many people will be quick to point out that, of course, we had the global pandemic and membership loss was maybe expected. What I'm actually here to tell you, though, is that membership loss was actually inevitable, regardless of whether we had a pandemic or not. To illustrate that point, let me show you some data in a different way, specifically membership data. What we have here is a graph showing the percentage change in membership from 2010 to 2021. And there's a few things that may be obvious here to you as well at first glance. First is this kind of dotted line that shows a quite horrific steady decline in how many more members we're able to add to the medical schemes industry year on year. But it's actually a graph of telling two stories. So the first we can break up into what we can call the golden years between 2010 and 2013, where the industry was experiencing, I guess, what you can call fairly healthy growth. Now these are not big numbers, but this is an industry that represents just under 9 million lives. Right? So yeah, this is not bad growth considering where we're coming from. But from 2014 onwards, you can see that there's a steady kind of fall off, a step down, if you will, down to the 0 points in the low 1%. And it's not something that we've been able to drag ourselves out of, even before the pandemic. And the problem is, of course, is that when a medical scheme industry, or any industry that is in this type of business, when you get to a flattening of membership or stagnation of membership, or indeed a decline, what that means is that membership will begin to age, and age more rapidly than you would like it to. And that's exactly what we've seen in the medical schemes industry. So as you can see, between 2010 and again 2014, maybe 2015, we had fairly muted aging. We had about 0.8 of a year's worth of age, between 2010 and 2015, but then that started to accelerate quite aggressively to 2021, where I think we aged about 1.3 years within that span. And aging brings with its own set of problems. This is an industry that is there to pay for people when they get sick. And people are unfortunately more sick when they are older than they are when they're younger. And that is, again, exactly what we've seen. If we have a look here at the average claims ratios of the medical schemes, and again, we track an average, which you probably see first. So we have this steadily climbing claims ratio ending up at 92.2% in 2021. To explain what that means, it means that medical schemes paid out 92.2% of all their contributions received in claims. That leaves less than 8% for a medical scheme to pay their bills. Bills such as their administrators. Those are the people who answer the phones, who actually process the claims, right? Who go and find new members. Right? When you deal with a medical scheme, chances are you're probably dealing with the administrator, not the medical scheme itself. Right? The scheme also has to have enough money to put away for reserves for the next year. And the chances are that the less than 8%, the 7.8% that was left of these top 10 open medical schemes probably wasn't enough. And to make up the difference, to balance the books, the only place they can go is to their members. They have to charge them more for next year, not just for benefits, but to make up for the losses that they made in the current year. To understand why this is such a big issue, you need to think of membership to a medical scheme, or at least young and healthy membership, as vital to a medical scheme as oxygen is to you and I. Without oxygen, a human suffocates and dies. Without new membership, a medical scheme simply ages and eventually claims itself to death. In the past, or at least prior to around about 2010, a medical scheme at least had a fighting chance of attracting new entrants. This is largely because the industry as a whole was attracting new lives into the medical scheme universe. But now the industry isn't growing. Well, I lie. The Council for Medical Schemes annual report says that there was some growth, but it's less than 1% overall. And not only is that not enough, I'm struggling to see where any growth is actually going to come from without any major foundational change. And I'm not saying foundational change won't happen, but I think it'll take too long, and it may be too late for quite a number of medical schemes. And that is the topic for our next video. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch our, I guess it's still fairly rough video, and please feel free to engage with us in the comments. We still got quite a lot of content to come, a lot of exciting announcements to make. We're a little young, I still think, for the please like and subscribe bit, but if you want to contact us directly, please feel free to do so. We'll put our contacts in the description and at the end of this video. And until then, look after yourselves, be good. Bye-bye.